Well, look, I'm very happy with what we've got so far. We can display the messages, they're all looking good, different types. The one thing really missing from the core functionality, the kind of minimum viable, product of this plugin would be now to put the fact that we've read this message into the message read table because this is empty right now. So once we've seen a message, let's do something more to it. Let's do, after we've seen them all, how should we do this? We'll insert a record into the message read table. So we'll do something like read record, new standard class. What do we need in a read record? We need message ID, user ID, time read. Okay, well, we have the message ID. Message ID is going to come from the message, so message ID, which makes sense. We need to match up which message we're talking about here in the table. And then what's the next thing we need? User ID. In Moodle, you can always get the user ID with a global variable called the user variable. So as soon as you've done the config step, for example, like where was it? Here, your user is initialized. So we can get it like this, and you've got a lot of properties here for the user. One of them being the ID. We can get it like that. Next is the time read. Yeah, we can do that. Time read equals time. We can do it like that. So this is like just a basic Unix timestamp returning function. It's part of PHP, not Moodle. Okay, and then we can go db insert db insert record local message read, and put in obviously our read record. Yeah, I think that's all we need really. So we can show that we've read them. Now we want to make sure we don't select them. So first, well, why don't we give this a quick test? If we refresh, that should still work, but now we've got a bunch of messages that have been read. So they're all by my user. The admin user is ID number 2. Same time, obviously, but these are different message IDs. The problem now is, if I refresh this again, look at this. I'm going to mark the same message that has been read again. So that's not really making sense. And also, we shouldn't even be seeing these messages again, because I want the functionality to be, once we've read a message, it doesn't display over and over every single page load. I don't want to keep seeing this message. I've seen it, I've dismissed it, that's cool. So let's just improve our logic. And also, I guess, just delete all these records for now. Empty that table again. So instead of just getting records, we're going to want to get records that have not been read. So to do this, up until now we've been using very simple database functions like this. But let's just give it a try to write a more complicated SQL query, because that's pretty much very appropriate for what we have here. So this is the way you do it. First you write your SQL in a new variable. So let's see, select all from local message. And this is how you do it. So Moodle will automatically put the prefix, so you just want to put the table like this with curly brackets. And then let's give it a alias like, local message join local message read mr local message read on local message ID equals local message read dot message ID. I think that makes sense. We also obviously want to put a condition here where local message read dot user ID let's say that this is going to be not equal to a parameter, which is going to be our user ID, like that. So you put SQL like that in a variable, so it's just a string. But my PHP store, my code editor, is figuring out that it's SQL, and that's why it's highlighting it a bit differently. It's kind of freaking out at the fact that these are curly brackets though, so it's not really that helpful anyway. Then let's put in the parameter. So we can just say params equals an array, and it's just got one thing, user ID, user ID, like that for now. And then we can do something like this, messages equals get records SQL, SQL params. That's the way you're supposed to do it, SQL with some params. We can do some limits as well. And in fact, I think what we're going to need is, let's put a left join here, because we want to get all the records from local message even when there's no record in the other red table, right? So we want to get definitely all the messages here, but we just don't want to get them if it's the same user ID, or it's fine to get it if we want to get it if the user ID is null. That means that there is no record, so then we do want to return it, or it's a different user ID, then we also want to return it. So either of these conditions here, or. Then let's keep fixing this. We don't need all. Let's just get the message ID, message text, message type. Yeah, let's give that a whirl. So we display them all because we selected them. Turn off debugging. Now we don't display them. That actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, this has got a bit tricky to get this right, but we want to select all the messages, left outer join, and then only return the ones where there's no user ID or the user ID is something different to our particular user. So right now, there's no messages being returned because our message table is full. It's got all the messages here. If we remove one of them from here, let's just delete message ID 4. That means we should display this message now on the next load, which is what we see, test 3. So that SQL is getting the right messages now. I've formatted it pretty ugly, so let's just fix this a little bit. Join where that, or I think something like that looks a little bit better, but yeah. Okay, that's pretty good. So because this is correct now, we don't really have to worry about inserting multiple records. We probably should have an extra check here, because that would be kind of bad if we just kept inserting more here, but obviously we can't because we don't select them in the first place. Yeah, because this SQL kind of filters them out. So let's just clean this up a bit. So obviously we're going to get the messages this way from now on. And that file is looking pretty good. And I think that's pretty good. So, I mean, let's just give it another test maybe. No messages for me. If I create a message, test 4, error. Yep, it comes up straight away. I mean, this page is a bit crazy, but we could do more tests with like another user. So if I log in as someone else, that might be a nice test. But for now, I think we've done a good job. So I'm going to just save what we've done. So let's go into terminal, local message, and I didn't do any more commits before because the plugin wouldn't have worked at all. But now I'm going to add everything and say this is the first commit of message plugin. Okay.